Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI and the Future of Work, episode 285. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact is particularly relevant to today's discussion. Charlotte Litton writes at BBC.com that AI hiring tools may be filtering out the best job applicants. A 2023 IBM survey of more than 8,500 global professionals showed 42% of companies were using AI screening to improve recruiting and human resources. Another 40% of respondents were considering integrating similar technologies. Body language analysis, vocal assessments, gamified tests, CV scans. Those are some of the tools that companies use to screen candidates with AI. Many leaders across the corporate world hope AI recruiting will end biases that are inherent in the traditional hiring process. Yet in some cases, the opposite can happen as well. It's important to get this right, says Sandra Wachter, professor of technology and regulation at the University of Oxford's Internet Institute. Having AI that is unbiased and fair is not only the ethical and legally necessary thing to do, it's also something that makes a company more profitable. There's a very clear opportunity to allow AI to be applied in a way so it makes fair and more equitable hiring decisions. That, again, is from Professor Wachter. As always, we'll link to the full article in today's show notes, a fascinating topic that we've had many fascinating discussions about. But now shifting to today's conversation. Jonathan Siddharth is the visionary leader behind Turing, the unicorn AI juggernaut that powers technical recruiting for more than 900 companies, including Pepsi, Dell, Disney, Red Bull, and the list goes on. Turing was most recently valued at $4 billion, has raised more than $140 million, and is backed by some incredible investors, including Westbridge Capital, Foundation Capital. We've had Ashu and Joanne from Foundation on this podcast, as well as others. Jonathan's a repeat entrepreneur who received his master's in computer science at Stanford and was a board member at Quora. Without further ado, Jonathan, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI and the Future of Work. Let's kick things off by having you share a bit more about your background and how you got into the space.
Hi, Dan, and it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Jonathan Siddharth, CEO and co-founder at Turing. And Dan, as you mentioned, I've just been excited about AI right from I would say freshman year in college. I got into AI when I was just fascinated by I think the science fiction lure of having an intelligent assistant that could amplify human productivity. And at the time, before I formally studied machine learning, AI, and all of these different fields, I was just fascinated by neural networks because I thought it sounded cool, and I thought it was the biological inspiration was interesting to see if we could somehow build something that kind of sort of worked like the brain. So I started off in AI just building things by myself, like tinkering. And one of the first things I tinkered with was to build software that could guide a self-driving car and have it automatically learn how to overtake human drivers, how to drive in like a simulation that I had to code up myself. And then I published a bunch of papers in AI. I came to Stanford. At Stanford, I met my wonderful co-founder, Vijay. I started an AI company called Rover after that did personalized content recommendations. That company had a successful exit. And then Turing was company number 2, where I again teamed up with my co-founder, Vijay. Turing's just growing super fast. Like we have a great team at Turing that's making all of this possible. And my journey, Dan, like has been sort of interesting where I started off by wanting to be an AI researcher. So I was much more of a scientist when I was at Stanford. Like I was interested in AI algorithms that could build a smarter Google, like better search, better recommendations. I was naive enough to think at the time that I could build a company that could be bigger than Google at search. And at the time, like I feel like this was the mid 2000s, I think there were a lot of companies still competing with Google on core search. Um, so I started the company, raised some capital. Eventually, the company had a good acquisition, but that was a good journey. So I kind of had this evolution from scientist, engineer to a CEO over these two companies. And being a founder, I mean, you probably know this, is such an incredible journey where you create the company and the company creates you in some ways, right? We are both shaped by that journey. And in my first company, like the first 4 years, I probably made every first time founder mistake that you could make. And the second leg of the journey, like it was about learning from those mistakes, making the changes to make sure the company was successful. And I find myself still learning at Turing. Turing's been such a different journey from my first startup. So my first startup was a 9-year journey, and I'd only raised like about 6 million. So the company was generating revenues and ran pretty lean. Turing, on the other hand, has been a rocket ship, like going from 1 to 100 million in revenues in 3 years, becoming a unicorn in like a little over 3 years, and just growing really, really fast. And I feel like I'm still the same person, but it felt like in one case, it's like switching from, like a going from like a Toyota to a Formula One car in like between two companies, and you're still the same person. And it's been fun.
So take us back to that Jonathan the Tinker as an undergrad, and versus the Jonathan leading a global juggernaut of a company today. What did the Jonathan undergrad tinker not know about who the Jonathan of Turing would become?
I think the Jonathan, the tinkerer in undergrad and in grad school, was all about um, being curious about what problems AI could solve really well. And I had this sort of sense of wonder about what AI was able to accomplish even back then. And I'm going to share a little bit about what's common between the Jonathan of undergrad, grad, and the Jonathan of today, and what's different. What's common is that same sense of wonder that I had, like the first time I had to train a reinforcement learning algorithm to balance a pole, like you had to teach a robot to like balance a pole by moving like a cart, and the pole might tip over, so you might have to move this way to catch it, and it might tip over, you have to move this way to catch it. And you train that by teaching the algorithm to do lots and lots of trials and giving it like positive feedback when it does something well, negative feedback when it does something wrong. And the algorithm automatically learns based on the rewards that it's getting how to act. So you don't hard code the rules. The system is learning the rules itself. And I remember like at Stanford, like in my office in the Gates building, I went to sleep coding it up where it was still failing, right? It would try to balance the pole and it would fall down. They would do another trial, it would fall down. So, and I think it was like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And I'd gone to sleep at that time. And then I woke up at like 8 a.m. to get down, to go to class, like downstairs in the Gates building. And when I woke up on my computer, it was like balancing it perfectly, right? And at night while I was sleeping, like it was like making all of these different trial and error experiments. And when I woke up, it was like balancing it like that, right? Like and I could not balance it like that. Like you need incredible reflexes to like move it left and right to do it. And I remember that feeling that I had at that time, like, wow, this is so cool. Like I sort of set up the environment, but I did not teach it how to behave. And the in AI, that's the cool thing. You have these jaw-dropping moments that you don't get in other problems in computer science, like which are much more deterministic. You code the algorithm, you know that with this input, here's the logic, this is the expected output. You kind of know what you're going to get. But with machine learning and AI, that's the magic of it, like where you give an algorithm like this training set of inputs and outputs, and it builds this model, this generalized model. And now when it sees unknown inputs, it knows what to do. And that's what fascinated me about AI, like right at the start, that non-determinism, that sort of intelligence that you can imbue into a machine just by giving it raw data and it's building the model. And I feel like even today, I still have that sense of, I'm amazed by that sense of magic. Like today, these days, I don't get to code as much as I would have liked to. But I code on nights and weekends, like just for fun, like to build certain systems, particularly in Gen AI and with LLMs. And I still get that same sort of sense of goosebumps sometimes, like, wow, this is cool. And it's going to change the world. It's going to amplify human productivity, and it's going to be game changing. So that's the thing that's the same. I still love coding. I still love the magic that AI sometimes brings to the world with specific products. What's different is I think the Jonathan in grad school and undergrad uh, probably I used to think about when you build a company, like the most important thing that you need is um, to when I would think about like what's a good company to start, the way I thought about it was um, uh, the what's a problem that I am uniquely good at solving that I could code up and sort of win on, let's call it pure algorithmic innovation. Right? So my first startup was like that. It was a personalized search and recommender company, and it it and I started the company just assuming, okay, with a better algorithm, we could out Google a Google, right? Now, when I think about sort of what it takes to build a big business, I see that there are so many other pieces that you have to get right. Number one, you need to pick a big market where there are a lot of buyers in the market. There are a lot of potential revenues to be had. You kind of have to pick a big market first. Markets that don't exist don't care how smart you are. Um, I think Mark Andreessen said that. So that's number one. And then you have to, even though you picked a big market, you have to pick a small slice of that market to start with first and utterly dominate. So that's kind of the Peter Thiel 0 to 1 principle. So that market sizing is so important. And second, it's I now think in terms of what I would call active blind spot monitoring. In my first company, the way I would think about company building is, hey, what's the product that we can build? Does it solve these a customer's needs? Then let's build it. But now I think about what's the product that we are not building? Who are the team members that we don't have today? If we're about to launch something, we think about if for some reason this fails in the first year, what are the most reasons? What are the most likely reasons? And how do we mitigate those risks? So instead of thinking of the set, I also think of the complement of the set now. And I think that that's really important. And the third is I think you have to really be good at recruiting great people, building a great team, and building good systems, building a great culture to make sure that people can do their best work. Um, and I think I have a much uh, richer appreciation uh, for leadership, for the importance of leadership, culture, management, than I did when I was in undergrad. I think the myth that gets told is, oh, two guys came up with the PageRank algorithm, and suddenly there's Google, right? But no, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think when you're sort of in school, you kind of miss all of that. And that's the difference. I think the importance of market and the importance of uh, building a high performance organization um, and are very, very important that I didn't fully appreciate back then. The one thing I did have in common with me from a couple of decades back is I was always driven by continuous improvement. And this again came from my machine learning roots. In machine learning, like you kind of train an algorithm to improve epoch over epoch to minimize a certain loss function, right? If you imagine like gradient descent or some other algorithm, like your every epoch you're trying to get better at making sure that you can do well on the training set. So so I think about every day how I can be better the next day. So I have like a list of things that I'm always working on to make myself better. So every day I go to sleep, I want to wake up a little bit smarter, a little better. on certain areas that I identified as my areas for growth. So, and I think it compounds. I literally have an app on my phone where I track, did I work on my own self-improvement today?
Jonathan, I've asked that question hundreds of times. That's the most human, authentic answer I've heard. It was just thank you for taking us on that journey. Now, I'm going to guess, based on the fact that it took you and I almost a year to get this one calendared, that when you look at your schedule for the day, it's filled with a lot of things that don't involve tinkering. What's the skill for you, being first a leader and a manager and a CEO, that has been the hardest to cultivate?
It's the skill that's the hardest to cultivate. I think I'll talk about the skills that are hardest to cultivate, and I'll also talk about the skills that are relatively easy to cultivate, but don't seem obvious to cultivate, so people may not know to cultivate them. I think the hardest thing to cultivate is being able to push the company with an uncomfortable sense of urgency. Like I call it a maniacal sense of urgency. Like I want Turing to operate with a maniacal sense of urgency, which means we don't plan in quarters and months. We want things in days and weeks. Right? Pushing that sense of urgency where people will complain and certain folks will complain. You'll hear the inevitable sort of backlash at times that, oh, are we moving too fast? Like maybe we should think things through. But I think speed wins in startups and companies. Speed wins. If you look at kind of how Elon operates, Tesla, SpaceX, etc., it's an uncomfortable sense of urgency, a maniacal sense of urgency, crazy deadlines. I think that's like a hard skill to cultivate because it means making yourself uncomfortable, making your teams uncomfortable, making your organization, putting it in a little bit of a state of edge, right? And there's a little more stress in the system. Right? And you kind of have to have a pretty high pain threshold in some ways, like to be able to do that both to yourself and to the. I mean, you are the organization in some ways, like your psyche is that. I think that's a hard skill to cultivate, to really push for urgency every minute, every meeting, every day, where when somebody is saying this will take 3 weeks, asking them what can we do today to take a step forward in that? What can we do right now? Right, like to take a step forward. And usually there are things you can do right now, right? And so the first thing that's important but difficult to cultivate is a maniacal sense of urgency, both for yourself and the organization. That's number one. The second thing that I think a lot of founders, CEOs probably find hard is, because it's a very unnatural thing, it's that you should not, you should be very comfortable not being liked potentially with certain decisions, right? Like your decisions should be based on what's best for the customer. What's best for the customer is what's best for the business. And I think just operating with that with a mindset of like keeping the customer first. And oftentimes, like in business, there will always be easier decisions, path of low resistance decisions. It's not comfortable to have a vigorous debate with someone about a product direction or like a strategy direction. It's easier to just nod your head and go along, like if it's okay. So I want to create a culture at Turing where people feel okay debating, disagreeing, and generally not being. It's okay to not be liked. It's more important to be respected and making sure you're making the right decisions. I think that's not an obvious thing. I think humans probably have a desire just to be liked and to get along. And I think, but as a leader, you kind of have to know when to push. That's the second thing that's kind of difficult. If I think about what's the third that's difficult to cultivate, it's not difficult, but I think like for most CEOs, I think you kind of need to. I always think of this trifecta of technology, business, and people. You kind of have to be good at all three, particularly if you're the CEO: technology, business, and people. You have to be You have to know the technology well enough to be able to solve the problem better for your customers than anybody else. You have to be good at business to make sure that you can build a valuable company that's valued highly by investors and others. And you have to be good at people, like relationships, sales, recruiting, things like that. So technology business people, you kind of need that trifecta. And if you're not good at any one, like you have to, I think it's tough. I think you kind of have those are that's the piece. I'll say one easy thing, Dan, like which is important that every CEO, I think exec should do is do a time audit and a calendar audit. So what I do every week is I make a list of things that I want to get done next week, and they're organized in 3 to 4 buckets in terms of the main areas of importance for the company. And I literally make a list of things of what do I want to get done next week. And then I make sure that my calendar matches up with those priorities. So I don't follow my calendar follows my priorities. And then at the end of the week, I get to strike off and I get a nice endorphin rush. Oh, I worked on these and I got this done. So my tagline, again, it's a little bit inspired by my tagline for both of those is what did I get done last week and what am I going to get done next week? And I have that same format that I share with my exec team as well. My exec team fills out what did I get done last week? What will I get done next week? And that makes sure that you're kind of working on whatever creates the most business value for the company at all times and you're not being reactive.
Jonathan, you mentioned the Marc Andreessen quote about markets and market sizing. Be curious to know, when you stumbled upon recruiting as the problem that you picked to solve at Turing, and you were thinking about that as potentially being ripe for disruption using AI, what about that market got you excited?
Yeah. So Turing's mission, Dan, is to use AI to unleash the world's untapped human potential. And the way we are doing that is by building the world's first AI-powered tech services company. So Turing is an AI-powered tech services company. Imagine Accenture, TCS, Wipro, Infosys, Cognizant, etc. That's the traditional tech services company. They do manual sourcing of talent, manual vetting of talent, manual coding and delivery. We use AI to automatically source developers, use AI to vet and match talent, and now we're using generative AI to speed up the productivity of the teams that we deploy. And our clients come to Turing for 3 specific things. We either deliver projects for our clients. So we are working with clients like many of the clients that you mentioned. So today, some of our clients include Disney, Pepsi, Rivian, Coinbase, Reddit, many others. So our OpenAI, Anthropic, etc. too. So our clients come to us either for the fact that we deliver projects for them, and our projects tend to be around generative AI infused solutions to business problems, or to train LLMs to get even better at model performance for coding, problem solving, reasoning, etc. We help companies with supervised fine tuning, RLHF, etc. And we also do product engineering projects, like just build high quality custom engineering applications. Right? So number one, we deliver projects. Number two, we deliver vetted talent. So Dan, for example, for your company, if you needed 5 React Node developers, 5 full stack developers, you can come to Turing, push a button and get vetted talent, and you can scale up your team, scale down your team as you like to. So those are the 2 things that we do: deliver projects, deliver vetted talent, and particularly focused on LLM training, where we work with all the major foundation model companies today. Now, to your question, what about this market got us excited? Number one, the sheer size of the thing. This is a $1 trillion market, and the 2 biggest companies, Accenture and TCS, are at 200 billion market cap. They're still relatively small. It's a big market, highly fragmented, very low NPS. Nobody really likes who they're working with, and that's a beautiful market to disrupt. Like lots of revenues going into it, but nobody likes who they are working with it with anyways, and they're kind of commoditized, like all of these companies. It's a little bit like how the car market was like a little bit prior to Tesla coming in. It's also very analog, very manual, very labor intensive. So our goal is to build an AI first tech services company where we can make something a lot more efficient. And I've found it much better to compete with non-tech companies than with tech companies. In my first startup, we were competing with tech companies. We were competing with Google, Facebook, Apple, many of these companies. And I can tell you, it was brutal. It is brutal. It is draining with like a 20-person team to compete with like a 50,000, 100,000 company. It is it's like attacking an aircraft carrier with an F-22 Raptor. And Turing, on the other hand, is we are competing with fundamentally non-tech brick and mortar companies like Accenture, TCS, Wipro, Infosys. And that is so much better. It is so much better. I know how Tesla must feel competing with Ford, GM, and Volkswagen, and all of these companies. It is, it is. I mean, those companies also have to transform and become AI companies now, and I think many of them will. But the thing I liked about this market is big market. Customers are not quite happy with who they're working with, and fundamentally an analog market where a digital solution will be very disruptive. Turing is to Accenture what Tesla was to Ford or Amazon was to Barnes and Noble.
I thought that you were disrupting the traditional recruiting industry, less so the traditional BPO, the business process outsourcers. We recently had as a guest on the show the CTO of Wipro, who I thought provided a compelling argument about how Wipro is trying to reinvent itself as, of course, an AI-first company. But Turing didn't need to reinvent itself. Turing was AI-first from day one. What's your advice to the C-suite at companies like the traditional BPOs that may need to be very, very aware of what's ahead when companies like Turing start to really eat into their market?
So I'll share my advice. It's easy to give, but hard to follow. It's like be very comfortable disrupting yourself. The biggest mistake many companies make is that when there is a big disruption or change happening, they change too slowly. They try to do these itsy bitsy pivots. Oh, wait, let's just do this a little bit differently. When sometimes you need like a big wholesale change. And in Turing's case, there are two big tailwinds that have disrupted everything. Number one, the push towards remote work and distributed teams. People have realized now, by and large, for software companies, you can work as a distributed team by default. You can work from home by default and then meet as you need. That's a huge change. So all these big tech services companies that have giant campuses are in trouble because now they're like trying to get people to come back and work in their offices, and nobody wants to come back. They've all gone to places that is much better for their personal life, much better quality of living, and would like to work remotely and meet as needed. And they're getting their work done anyways. So that's disruptive for them. So remote work was a disruption. The second disruption is AI. And AI is a huge disruption both on the demand side and on the talent side. On the demand side, it's a disruption because every company today needs to be an AI company. AI transformation is the new digital transformation. But to be an AI company, you first have to be a data company. And you have to make sure that you're building the right infrastructure for your data needs. And to be great at doing this, you have to be an AI company yourself. And unfortunately, many tech services companies, because they are analog brick and mortar companies, what do they know about like what's the right solution? Turing benefits from being a AI native company ourselves. We have to build massively scaled AI systems to do vetting at scale, matching at scale, managing our teams at scale. Dan, you'll be surprised, about 80,000 new developers sign up for Turing every month. And we have to build systems to automatically evaluate them using AI and others. So my advice to tech services companies would be to embrace the change and don't be afraid to cannibalize yourself. I think back to like the journey Steve Jobs and Apple must have had, like going from the iTunes model to streaming, right? Like which is a disruption. Like when people are buying like a whole CD to like people want to stream, you can either like pretend Spotify doesn't exist, or you can steer into it and build something better, right? And I think Apple did the right thing, and Yeah, I have a lot of respect for the tech services companies, like including Wipro, Accenture, TCS, and first they laid the foundation for where Turing is today. I think of this industry as evolving in sort of three epochs. Epoch one, Dan, was the BPO outsourcing era from the 90s, where it was Accenture, TCS, Wipro, Infosys. At that time, it was all about cost cutting, right? Like it was the boring stuff was sort of shipped somewhere to get done more cheaply. That was the Gen 1 companies like Wipro, TCS, Cognizant, Accenture, etc. I think of Gen 2 companies as these companies like Globant, Global Logic, EPAM, Endeavor, who started doing real product engineering. They actually built cutting edge products like for many of these clients, but they are still kind of centralized. Like they'll have a hub somewhere. Maybe it's somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe it's somewhere in South America, maybe it's somewhere in India. It's still hub. Turing is a generation 3 tech services company, which is number one, AI powered, and number two, globally distributed. The company is in the cloud. We are building Accenture in the cloud. And we call this category talent cloud. So much like the compute cloud, you can scale up, scale down as you need it. We think talent needs will also be like that. And it's been fun to be inventing this category and growing.
Great advice. I will say it's easier to give the advice as the disruptor than one of the among the disrupted. But I like that perspective. So you mentioned that both OpenAI and Anthropic are Turing customers, and so you're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who are building AI first companies, and I got to ask for your perspective on the AI ecosystem. So just kind of in no particular order, open versus closed source. Is there an opportunity, or I should say, what's the opportunity for startups to compete with big tech when they lack compute, they lack algorithms, let alone chips and that sort of thing, but they lack data, all the things that seem to give big tech an unfair advantage. What's your advice to startups who are trying to be AI first in an era when they don't own any of the AI infrastructure?
Yep. Great question, Dan. So firstly, I think of AI as a foundational shift. It's still a tool, but a foundational shift. And in my mind, there were three foundational shifts that I can think of. The rise of the personal computer was a foundational shift, an insane productivity boost, right? And it enabled all sorts of applications to be built on top. The second foundational shift is the rise of the internet itself, which enabled all sorts of applications to be built up. The third foundational shift was mobile, right? Which again was a huge productivity boost, lots of other applications built on top. I think of AI as that fourth wave. So computers, internet, mobile, and AI, right? But it's still a technology, a tool, a solution. We first have to get the problem right, right? So my advice to founders is number one, focus on the problem. What problem do you think you can solve for a customer much better than anybody else? Right? And that takes me to my second point, which is you have to be technical enough or team up with somebody technical enough to understand what are the technical capabilities that have become unlocked with the rise of generative AI and LLMs. You have to know the boundaries of the technology. LLMs can't do everything. They can do a few things way better than what supervised machine learning could do. You should know what that way better sort of areas where LLMs can make a difference. And you should also know where LLMs can't do are not the right tool, right? Generative AI is not the solution to all the world's problems. Like there are still many problems where supervised machine learning is the right approach. And there are other problems where machine learning or AI is not the right approach. You should use data science or data analytics or maybe like some other even non-AI based system, right? So you have to be deep in the technology to know what technical capabilities have been unlocked so that you can pick a problem for a specific customer for a big enough market, but you can start with a small slice of that TAM first, that you can solve it better than anybody else. And then you can build workflows, AI native interfaces on top of that and build a moat. Because if you start solving a problem really well for somebody, over a couple of years, you will know more about that customer segment than anybody else. And that will become your moat, right? Companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Amazon, they're not going to go deep into every single use case, right? For example, in Turing's case, the fact that we've been in business for like 6 years we've worked with some 900 companies and done so many matches of, we've given engineers to so many different companies. We've developed much better expertise than probably anyone on the planet in terms of how to vet talent, how to match talent, how to manage talent. That just comes by obsessing about that one vertical, that one problem domain for a very long time. So my advice to startup founders would be, number one, understand the new technical capabilities that are unlocked by LLMs, really deeply understand it. And second, pick a problem where LLMs can actually deliver a lot of business value. And ideally, it's something where you're helping your customers generate revenue rather than cut costs. I personally prefer things where you offer revenue acceleration than any efficiency boost. And then over time, like, you will build a moat with the data that you collect, the insights that you have about your customer. I think customer insights is probably the best sort of ever widening data moat. Every year you're in business, you're learning more, and it's tough for somebody to catch up. Like for a startup, I think the biggest friend is speed and focus, right? So if you're focused on some use case, and I know, Dan, like you're really focused on, I like your focus on HR, IT professionals. And that's key, right? You're not trying to be everything for everybody. OpenAI doesn't know as much about HR, IT professionals' problems and needs as you do, right? And it'll take them a while to catch up. You kind of have to you have to clock in the time to like really get there. And I think that's the advice for startups. Like, I would also, the thing to avoid is not to build things that would be obviously in the product roadmaps of an OpenAI or an Anthropic or a Google or a or any of these other, or an Amazon. And I think like it's not too difficult to predict like what would be in like a platform company's roadmap. It's not easy, but it's not that difficult. I've yeah, so I would just stay away from that. Like, don't try to play the same game. Like, play a different game. I feel like the things that 5 years ago AI companies would build, many of that has become commoditized as part of the base foundational model itself. 5 years ago, if you were like you had to build your own systems for question answering, classification, sentiment analysis, information extraction, machine translation, stuff like that. Now you get that out of the box. It's like part of the giant brain that OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, all these companies have trained. So don't do that. Don't try to make a better version of a model. Like, I guess if there's one piece of advice I would say, like, maybe like not to compete at the base model level, like the LLM, the foundational model level, but really pick something that's more specific for a specific vertical, a specific customer type, and build custom workflows. I think the thing we haven't seen yet is more AI native user interfaces. I think interfaces are going to become much more conversational, both in terms of text as well as audio and video. And that's going to change the way we interact. Like today, most user interfaces are still designed for the graphical user interface, like the point and click and keyboard-based entry. I think we are going to shift to a more conversational interface. I think in the future, a software engineer is going to code in conversation with their IDE. They're going to be like, hey, I wonder what this piece of code does, and the machine will explain it. And hey, can you give me a subroutine that does this? And it'll give you something, and you'll work on. Can you generate some test cases for this? So it's going to be wonderful. Like, the era of AI is just getting started. And I think there's plenty of green space for founders of startups as well as big enterprise companies to unlock crazy amounts of business value. The thing I'm excited about, Dan, is my team and I spend time with like Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and try to understand what business problems can be solved with Gen AI. And there are so many use cases to do things so much better than before. And I think we are still at like less than 1% of the way in terms of value unlocked.
Great advice. Good insights. Hey, Jonathan, unbelievably, we're about out of time. But before I let you off the hot seat, I saw in your an X post that you're launching an event series, AGI Icons, and I think you've got a special guest who's going to join you. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the thought leadership and about the event series.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, we are launching a very special event called AGI Icons. And for the inaugural event in the series, we have Sam Altman, CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, to come share his vision for AGI. I'm a huge fan of Sam, OpenAI, and all the incredible work that they've done to spark the Gen AI revolution with ChatGPT, and prior to that with DALL-E and many other wonderful tools. What we're doing with this event series is to bring together the builders, scientists, engineers, data specialists, people building the future of these AGI platforms and AGI products, and have a mixer with them, with guests like Sam Altman. So I'm going to be doing a fireside chat with Sam, and we'll also have like a lot of time for people to meet each other in San Francisco. And San Francisco is becoming kind of the epicenter for AI. And it's exciting to see like the talent density in San Francisco. So we're bringing people together. As you know, Dan, like we also offer this, one of the projects that we are known for is to help foundation model companies with LLM training. So we help these companies improve their model performance for coding, reasoning, problem solving, by helping them with both supervised fine-tuning and RLHF. We help them run a fully managed team where we work closely with their research team to do that. And we'll have more to share about that as well. But I'm excited for that event. I think that's going to be fun. And if you're an AI scientist, if you're an AI engineer, researcher, or data specialist, do email us at events@turing.com, or you can sign up at turing.com and check us out for either our LLM training solution, or if you're a CIO of a CIO, CTO, VP of engineering, and you want to think about how Gen AI can help solve your business problems, your product roadmap opportunities, come talk to us. We can help you build it. And of course, if you need talent, you can come to Turing, and we have 3 million software engineers on the platform, like across every role, tech stack, seniority level you can imagine. We are the largest developer-focused talent cloud. So you can also go to turing.com and get talent from us. So we deliver projects and we deliver vetted talent, and with a special focus on Gen AI and LLM training.
Jonathan, brilliant. Congrats on an amazing journey. I know you're just getting started, but this was a lot of fun, and I'd love to have you back sometime. I know we were just getting started with this conversation.
I'd be delighted to. This was a fun conversation. Thank you so much, Dan.
Excellent. Well, gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.